Hello everyone, my name is Ritesh Gupta. I'm from AI Events Airline Information. Welcome to AI's new video. Our topic for today is managing FFPs to be on the winning side after COVID-19. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our guest today, Jason Adessky. Jason is an expert in loyalty program study and management, someone who has worked with several carriers across the Asia Pacific region. These include Cathay, Qantas, and Virgin Australia. Hello, Jason, and thanks for being part of this conversation with us.
Hi there, Ritesh. It's great to be here. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today.
Jason, considering developments of late, how do you think FFP partnerships have evolved of late, and accordingly, how the power balance may have shifted?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've all seen the sad decimation of the travel industry over the past few months, and there's no need to drill into that in any great detail. That's been well documented, and we all have experienced that in one way, shape, or another over the past little while. But I recently left Cathay Pacific, and since then I've been spending quite a lot of time speaking with stakeholders, both on the travel side of the equation as well as the partner side of the equation, primarily banks and financial services and the likes. And as you can imagine, there's universal concern all around. So starting with the travel and loyalty provider perspective, so an FFP program by and large. I mean, if you go back to first principles, the dual mandate of an FFP program, a frequent flyer program, is to do two things. One is to principally drive loyalty back to the airline, so get people to travel more on airline A versus airline B and spend more on airline A versus airline B and so on and so forth. But equally, and more recently, the focus has been to drive third-party sales, third-party revenue effectively. Now, in a post-COVID-19 world where, frankly, there is limited, if no flying going on, there's limited ability to influence the consumer to fly more and their an ability to drive their share or their preferences as a result. Similarly, from a partner perspective, speaking from an operator's point of view, aside from some grocery and some e-commerce categories, by and large, most consumer spend is down, right? Not catastrophically down, because FFP members, frequent flyer members, tend to be more affluent and tend to have more wherewithal in terms of how they spend and where they spend and so on and so forth. But on the whole, it hasn't been great. So then if you look at it from a financial services partner perspective, so banks, credit cards, insurers, and so on, again, spend is down, so not dramatically so, but still enough to hurt. Insurers, people are claiming less, but still they're not selling they're not selling policies, people aren't borrowing, and so on and so forth. So simply put, the strategies that they had put in place to use miles and travel effectively as an incentive, frankly, is becoming less and less attractive. And so, as you can imagine, many of them are starting to rethink their strategies for engaging and motivating their customers off the back of those evolving strategies. So, on the whole, whilst both sets of stakeholders are hurting, so financial services as well as the FFPs and airlines, obviously, by and large, I would say that the bigger exposure would be from an FFP perspective, largely because they're more exposed to the travel world directly, and their primary source of advantage, which is cheap international redemption seats primarily, and ideally front-end redemption seats, just don't exist and won't exist for the short to medium term. Whereas banks and credit cards and others, they have a little bit more flexibility in that space to drive behavior and change behavior.
Jason, definitely the spending is hurting at the moment. But if we look at the longer term picture, we know the deals were signed in the initial part of the pandemic. I'm referring to the pre-purchase of loyalty currency. But what happens when the fleets shrink? What kind of impact this will have on redemption at a later stage?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. It's a really good question. I think as a general principle, as fleets shrink, that means there's going to be structural changes, and those structural changes will naturally flow down through through into frequent flyer programs and ultimately to partners and customer behavior as well. So smaller airlines, by and large, mean fewer redemptions. Fewer redemptions, again, on the whole, in certain segments it'll change, of course, but on the whole, fewer redemptions means lower third-party billings. So FFPs become relatively less attractive because airlines will then start shifting, and hotels and other travel providers will start shifting toward discounts because they're going to try and use those as more attractive, immediate levers to incentivize more price-sensitive travel. That said, it's not all doom and gloom. FFPs are phenomenally sophisticated data and marketing machines. But some of the gloss will inevitably come off these programs unless they aggressively pivot. So you look at some of the announcements that are coming out, in particular from the American carriers, for example. So you see numbers like $30 billion, a $30 billion valuation for AAdvantage, $20 billion for Mileage Plus, and so on and so forth. Based on the deals that they've done historically with Amex, Citi, Chase, and others, of course. Under the best of circumstances, in my view, those are dubious evaluations. I struggle to get my head around how you can credibly assess that those numbers make sense. But on a go-forward basis, they really stretch the bounds of credibility. So, when airlines, for example, are using those valuations as effectively collateral to borrow funds and maintain operations, yes, it might be the best of a series of bad options, but I'd be very, very careful around how much and how valuable those programs are or were today versus where they were several months ago. So I think there's a lot of very careful consideration to be playing because the ability to sell credit cards going forward, I think, will be challenged.
And Jason, whatever the magnitude of billing is going to be, how to optimize revenue on this billing? We know there's several mechanisms because of which revenue can be increased, be it for deferred interest, be it for redeeming at lower value and breakage. So how to ensure that revenue on the billings is on the higher side?
Yeah, so I think the reality is it's hard to see revenues going up for the foreseeable future, but I think there are ways to mitigate the loss, shall we say. So I think, if I were still running the programs that I've been involved with over the past few years and other programs, I'd be looking at it in three ways. One is breakage is a huge lever, as we all know, right? So the miles that are sold and ultimately don't get redeemed are pure profit for the group. Now, you could argue whether it's good profit, bad profit, and so on, but regardless, if you're a sophisticated operator, you have and had a strategy regarding breakage over the past number of years. Going forward, I would be seriously rethinking that strategy. The historic models that we built or that were in place, frankly, just do not apply anymore. And so you need to really carefully consider what the appropriate levels of breakage are, what the appropriate levels of breakage should be, and how you're going to influence those by segment, by individual customer, by partner strategy, by marketing strategy, and so on and so forth, to really optimize that lever, because it is a fairly significant lever. The second dimension that I would consider, or the second option that I would consider, is in a world where, as we said before, international travel and international front-end travel redemptions are going to be severely constrained, or could be severely constrained on a go-forward basis, or at the very least less attractive on a go-forward basis, I'd be looking to diversify my redemption options. So every program out there under the sun has the rice cookers and the toasters and the gift cards and the so on and so forth, and those are fine. But I think in a new normal situation where local travel is at best your best option, I would suggest we start looking more towards high margin experiences, local experiences, for example, where frankly local operators are hurting badly, and there's a real opportunity to help them out by channeling a lot of value and a lot of great new customers their way. and there can be a lot of really good upside for both parties by engaging in experiences. But most importantly, in my view, I think what's the expression? Never let a good crisis go to waste. I think this presents a really interesting opportunity, particularly for more forward-thinking and more bold programs and partnership strategies, to really think whether this presents an opportunity to overhaul the business model. So whether it's be the financial model, the organizational, or the process, there's enormous amount of friction and silos that have been created over the years that has really hindered the growth of the programs and growth of the partnerships with those programs. So the model, if you think about it, hasn't really changed all that much in 20 or 30 years. So banks, FFPs, and airlines are all complicit in diluting the value that customers should and could be enjoying. So you think about the complexity in the process of minting a mile through redeeming a seat. Credit cards could and should be offering much better value propositions at a lower cost. And frankly, airlines, including FFPs, could be far more efficient in their distribution of seats if the 20 or 30-year-old outdated ways of working are challenged. And to me, this is what I've been spending a lot of time on over the past several months. And this is, to me, where I think the real opportunity is, because there's an enormous amount of friction and there's an enormous amount of wastage as a result of that friction due to reasons that, frankly, don't need to exist anymore. And so I think that's where the real opportunity lies.
Jason, can you comment on partner economics and partner customer strategy?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're a financial services business right now, you're actively looking to figure out your customer strategy and how to potentially diversify away from travel redemption options if you can. If you're locked into a long-term deal, you're probably looking into negotiating how you can extract a lot more value from those deals, whether it's extensions at favorable terms or flexibility and commitments, or forcing, frankly, the airlines and the programs to make changes that historically they may have been more reluctant to explore. Simply put, where 6 months ago life was looking very, very good and very, very easy for a program operator and an airline, today the pendulum has swung and travel just isn't as attractive as it once was, for at least for the short and medium term. And so from a financial services perspective, they're looking a lot more aggressively at how they can revise their strategies and influence a lot more the direction of travel, for lack of a better term, in this space. So I think they're going to be looking to reduce their costs and looking to increase the options and flexibility that they have available to them.
And finally, what would be your recommendations, do's and don'ts for managing a loyalty travel program at this juncture?
So I think there's a lot of opportunity. As I said, there's a lot of people who are doing it tough right now. There's no doubt about it. But on the flip side, activity has reduced by and large, and so it presents more time to think and more time to step back and reevaluate what's working, what's not working, and consider new ways of working. So what I would be encouraging, and what I have been encouraging over the past several months, has been to be flexible, to be open-minded, and to be more aggressively thinking change, and aggressively thinking, how can I reduce the friction in the process? How can I break down those silos that are inhibiting future growth once whatever new normal looks like in the future comes to fruition? So, I mean, I personally still fundamentally believe that frequent flyer programs and travel loyalty programs are fantastic businesses, and they will continue to be fantastic businesses in the future. But now's the perfect time, really, to start thinking about pivoting and thinking about how you can really accelerate the growth once the situation stabilizes a little bit. And there's so many ways of doing that, which I think are really, really exciting.
Thanks, Jason, for your time.
Thank you, Ritesh. It was great to speak with you.